What's going on, Summoners, and welcome back to another episode of ProGuides Best Champions to Main, now on patch 11.6. These champions are all about high performance with low ban rates that are unlikely to get nerfed in the immediate future. The most reliable picks in the game that are the most worthy of investing time in. So hit that sub button and let's get into it. Starting things off in the top lane, we'll begin with my favorite sappy boy, Maokai. With so many bruiser items being nerfed and Sunfire being buffed, you'll want to abuse tanks for some free LP this patch. The difference between tanks being strong and bruisers being strong is the mechanics required to execute them properly. Even though she's been an insanely powerful pick in high elo most of the season, Camille usually hovers around a 50% win rate overall because of how difficult it is for lower elo players to pilot her. But with tanks, when they're strong, they're also pretty much foolproof, thanks to their super simple to use kits, and of all the tanks, Maokai is one of the easiest to pull off, with almost no losing matchups thanks to his passive sustain and Q's ability to disengage the fights that you don't want to take. Once you have a lead, you can force trades with your W, constantly threatening your opponent when they move up to CS. Just try not to be too overzealous with the trades. Your main goal is to W in, auto to proc grasp with the Undying, and Q them away before they can trade back. Keep the trade short like this, and the sustain from grasp and your passive will allow you to steadily build an HP lead over your foe. Against AD bruisers, you'll want to rush the early game tank trifecta of Bommies, Steel Caps, and Bramblefest. Once you have that, you can just easily bully your opponents and even kill them in longer extended trades. Once out of lane, you'll want to focus on fighting around your summoner cooldowns. When you do, either look to flash engage on a target with W or look for a TP flank behind your foes. Unlike most tanks, whose main focus is ulting to engage, Maokai's ult is almost secondary to the rest of his kit. The multi-target route can give a nice bit of disruption to the enemy team, but your main goal is to stick to one target and keep them constantly CC'd and unable to do anything to the rest of your team. Usually this will be an AD carry. Maokai is one of the classic top laners in League. For several seasons now, his simple CC-loaded kit has made him a consistent tank that just always makes him good or great as a tank in the role. That rings true even now. Despite being more popular as a support these days in terms of play rate, he still has a higher win rate when played top. And that brings us to today's question of the day. What iconic champs represent their role? Be it due to solo queue popularity, pro play presence, or just your own opinion. We want to know what champs come to mind when you think of each role in League of Legends. For example, when I think of junglers, I immediately think of Lee Sin, mostly because I don't think I've ever seen him played in any other role, other than maybe just some fun normal games here and there. But let me know your answers in the comments down below. And our second pick for top lane is another tank, Cho'gath. Like Maokai, Cho'gath has built-in sustain from his passive, but since it comes from killing units, he's able to steadily win the lane even with low interaction, getting more mana and HP just from farming up, and using his ease Vorpal spikes to poke as you clear the wave. Like Maokai, you'll want to take short trades around grass procs after you land your CC, but if you're playing more passive, you can sit back and use CC to disengage instead. Once you get level 6, use your ult on the minion pretty much every time it's up to get your first few feast stacks. It can be tempting to try and use it on your lane opponent, but unless they're already really low on HP or you have a jungle gank 100% coming your way, it's just better to pick up the guaranteed bonus HP early. That said, if you know your team is going to go for a dragon or rift soon, you should always try and have your ult available. Not only does it outdamage smite in case the other team contests, but epic monsters don't count towards the 6-stack limit you have from using it against minions and other monsters. In teamfights, it's a bit harder to just dive into the team as Cho compared to other tanks, since you completely lack any form of gap closing or point-and-click CC. Instead, you just end up helping your team front to back, since your massive HP pool means that you should outlast the enemy frontline as long as your team isn't incredibly behind. As a frontliner, you'll use your Q to stop enemy threats from reaching your carries, with your ult's true damage helping to burst down even the tankiest of targets. And our last pick for the top lane is yet another tank, Shen. Where most tanks are focused on engaging and frontlining in 5v5 teamfights, Shen is better when you prefer the split push and skirmish style of gameplay. You'll also be building a bit of damage, both for pushing and dueling your opponents in the side lane. Usually you'll go Sunfire, Titanic Hydra, and Thornmail as the standard for a mix of heavy damage and tankiness, but if you're dealing with an AP champion, you can go Wits End third instead. In lane, you can force trades super hard, with the bursty damage from E and Q allowing you to shred your opponents, with them barely able to trade back thanks to your W. Being such a strong duelist, your only real weakness is being camped by the enemy jungler, so just be sure that you're using your wards to stay safe, and your dash is also an escape, so if you use it aggressively as the enemy jungler is waiting to gank, you won't have a way to back out, so use it sparingly. As I already touched on, Shen isn't really able to force fights. His E's low range means that without flash, you likely won't be able to reach any opponents that aren't already running at your team, and even then, you'll most likely just be taunting a frontliner. Instead, your goal in the mid to late stages of the game is to pressure the enemy team by splitting constantly. If an enemy or two comes to hold your push, you can ult to the rest of your team, forcing a fight with a numbers advantage. If the enemy team doesn't have a way to answer your split, they may group as 5 and look to fight elsewhere. Just keep splitting and taking towers, using your ult to get to the team fight the second anyone chooses to engage. Next up, let's look at some junglers. Starting off with a nightmare in the jungle, Nocturne. While most junglers have to choose between quick and healthier clears, or a strong dueling kit, Nocturne is one of the few that gets to fall into both categories. His passive sustain and AoE damage combined with Q's damage and boost AD give him a really healthy clear, with his W spell shield and E sphere making him almost impossible for most other champs to 1v1 him, even in the early game. Just keep soaking up as much farm as you can until you reach level 6. Once you do so, you should be looking to ult every time it's up. Just look to gank any overextended opponent that you can, preferably in a lane where your ally can follow up with either burst damage or better yet CC to ensure you the kill. Like most assassins, you'll want to look to make picks throughout the game instead of going for 5v5 teamfights. With that in mind, invest in control wards to both clear out enemy vision and give you vision to look for picks with your ult on opponents that think they're safe to rotate through their own jungle. This is where you'll get a lot of your kills. While most junglers should be picking up Oracle Lens to clear out wards, Nocturne is one of the few exceptions. You'll instead opt for Farsight Alteration to allow you to reveal faraway targets for your ult. And our second jungle pick is Skarner. If you're a regular viewer of our videos, you know that he's been one of the top tier picks for months now, but despite so much success, he's incredibly underplayed, and likely won't be getting nerfs to change that for quite some time. You'll follow a similar playstyle to Nocturne in the early game. Power farm your jungle, mostly focusing on getting to 6 as soon as you can, where your ult gives you pretty much guaranteed kills when you look to gank. Skarner is also a surprisingly strong duelist, but only when you're fighting near one of the spires that you control. If the enemy has it captured, don't even bother trying. Once you get out of the lane phase stages of the game, you'll look to make quick picks every time you have your cooldowns up. While Nocturne wants to ult onto lone targets and assassinate them himself, as Skarner, you'll want to group with your team, using Chemtank and Flash to drag an opponent into your team for free picks that you can then convert into objectives. And our last jungler is Mundo. While he doesn't have hard CC or burst damage to engage fights or make picks, his massive health pool, pretty high damage, and constant slows making him incredibly hard champ to deal with for enemy teams once you get a lead. Mundo's early dueling is also deceptively strong, thanks to the crazy damage from his E, especially as his health gets lower. That combined with the sticking power from his Q means that once an opponent overcommits to a fight, they often can't escape, resulting in you easily punishing over-aggressive foes that underestimate you. Once you get to the teamfight stage, you'll want to be as much of a backline menace as possible. Instead of providing hard CC to disrupt the enemy carries like other tanks, Mundo relies on his slows and relatively high damage as a tank to stick to 80 carries and mages and just beat them down. While he is technically immobile as he lacks a real gap closer, the movement speed from Chemtank and your ult, along with the tenacity that you'll have from your runes, items, and W, makes you incredibly frustrating to peel. So with a playstyle like that, Mundo is what we call a stat check champion. He runs at your carries and either he wins or loses the fight based on how fed he is versus how fed the enemy team is, with very little room for outplay on either side. That said, you'll want to consistently be able to get a lead if you're going to abuse Mundo for LP. Thankfully, that's where we come in. With a ProGuides subscription, you can get access to all of our courses, unlimited chats with our coaches, and discounted rates if you end up booking a session. And there's no better time than now, since we're doing a pretty big sale. Just use discount code RANKUP2021 for 20% off your subscription. With the help of all of our other resources, you'll be able to learn all you need from the basic do's and don'ts to the more advanced techniques so that you can consistently carry your games and reach your goals this season. Now moving on to the mid lane, get out of here Joey, this is my favorite time wizard, Zilean. Instead of being a traditional mage aimed at carrying with big plays, when you pick Zilean, you're looking to enable your teammates via your stun, speed-ups, slows, and of course your ult's powerful revive. In the first few levels, you'll have pretty much no priority over almost any laner, unless they choose to give it to you. Focus on farming as much as you can, and once you pick up an item or two, you'll eventually be able to one-shot the waves and move on to plays. Once it comes time to teamfight, you'll basically be playing to support and follow up on teammates, not making plays on your own most of the time. While a flash double bomb can look flashy when it works, trust me, it's relatively easy for your opponents to dodge most of the time. Instead, give your allies the movement speed they need to engage the fight, and then throw your double bombs onto the targets that they lock down to layer the CC and ensure the kill. You can also use them to zone out choke points in the jungle and control objectives. And before we move on, one quick side note on item choice. While you can do different build variants like go at Everfrost, Sork Shoes, and Void Staff to consistently land hard-hitting double bomb combos, the build that we have here is to maximize your ability to enable teammates by giving you as much CDR and AP as possible. The one item you can substitute out is Mejai's. Since you're playing to enable your teammates, you won't want to be ulting yourself for the sake of keeping stacks. If the opposing comp has too many threats that can easily dive onto you, swap out Mejai's for Banshees or Zhonya's. And our second pick for mid lane is Nico. Plenty of AoE damage, she can easily get priority in many matchups, meaning that you'll be your jungler's new best friend. Roaming and skirmishing aside, she also has some pretty OP trading potential in lane. Landing E on your opponent ensures that you'll get at least one extra pop of damage from your Q, with your rooted target being unable to trade back on you. Usually with lane dominant champs, their biggest weakness is being ganked. But since Nico's trading tools can all be used from a pretty decent range, you're pretty much immune to jungle ganks as long as you save your W to be used defensively instead of going in with it. In teamfights, your goal is simple. So honestly, there's not a lot to talk about. Just look to layer your E, Q, and ult to CC and burst down as many targets as you can, setting your teammates up to clean up the fight. With our build of Everfrost and Horizon Focus, you'll be able to one-shot opponents that you catch out with your combos, so pick up Oracle Lens and some control wards to maintain vision control and catch your opponents from the fog of war as they're rotating to objectives. Another thing to note about the build, we have Zhonya's as the last item, but you can definitely pick it up earlier if you need to survive teamfights, especially if you're playing against an AD mid laner and an AD jungler. And our last mid laner for this patch is Annie. What makes her such a solid pick in pretty much any meta is her ability to burst down targets with pretty much no mechanical skill required. Even her laning phase comes with training wheels. Her Q makes it incredibly easy to last hit, and since it refunds half of its already short cooldown and all of its mana cost, you can spam away to pick up every CS with very little prep work needed. And when you need to swap from just last hitting to shoving the wave, simply throw out W to soften the wave up for your Q. While it can be tempting to trade on your opponent every time you have stun up, that can lead to sloppy trading and bad wave positioning. Instead, you should actually try and keep trading to a minimum, and focus on putting your wave in a good spot for your jungler to gank. With your passive stun and point and click Q, you should easily be able to pick up kills on most opponents. Laning aside, you can also use Annie to either make picks or engage fights if an opponent oversteps just a bit and puts themselves in Flash Tibber's range. While most burst mages are limited to trying to take down backline carries, as Annie, you can often even delete bruisers once you pick up Rabadons and Voidstaff. Also, Tibbers just functions as a secondary frontliner, so keep that in mind based on your comp. And moving things down to the bot lane, we got a champ to get excited about, Jinx. With more tanks in the meta, meaning more frontliners to stand behind, hyper carries are becoming more and more appealing, since they're able to free fire and dish out way more damage as their teammates serve as a wall to protect them. While the concept of being a hyper carry generally means weak early, ultra scaling late game, Jinx actually does pretty good early game these days, and can even be paired with champs like Leona, Thresh, and Braum to look for kills in lane. That said, she is immobile, so when she's dealing with aggressive enemy supports and mobile AD carries like Lucian and Tristana that can jump on her, you'll be heavily punished for mispositioning, so make sure that you don't get too cocky. Regardless of how lane phase goes, your main goal as Jinx is to group up and take team fights around objectives, mowing down your opponents with reset after reset. If the enemy team has a tanky frontline, consider picking up a Lord Dominik's Regards as early as your third completed item, since the only way to play Jinx in teamfights is to fight front to back. And our second pick for bot lane is Caitlyn. Instead of aiming to be a hyper carry that pops off in explosive teamfights like Jinx, when you're playing Caitlyn, you'll be aiming to methodically take objective after objective. In lane, your goal is simple: hard shove waves with Q and constantly auto attack, trading on your opponents every time that they get in range to reach a minion. Once you shove them under tower, you'll keep pressuring up, slowly chipping away at their turret's HP, and alternating to poke your opponents when they get in range to try and last hit. And make sure you spam your traps under the tower too. Your opponent will have a lot to track between staying out of range of your autos, dodging Qs, and also worrying about CS, so they'll likely end up stepping on a trap and taking even more damage. And once you take the tower in your lane, quickly rotate to other lanes and try and take those towers as well. Your goal is to just knock down tower after tower to give your team map control. This leads to easier dragons, counter jungling, and eventually the enemy team is just choked out of the game without the need to overly force fights. And our last pick for the bot lane carries is actually a mage, Veigar. Being a mage means that you're going to completely change up your playstyle if you're used to trading patterns that come with being a marksman. In fact, in Veigar's case, you'll almost entirely be focusing on clearing waves and picking up as many passive stacks as you can early game. The time you reach the ability to kill your lane opponents will vary based on what champs you're playing against and what support you're laning with. For example, when playing with an aggressive support like Leona or Blitzcrank, you can easily 100-0 a squishy opponent at level 6 if you just chain your combo onto their catch. But if you're laning with an enchanter, or your support just isn't going in, you'll want to keep on farming until you reach at least your Everfrost and Sword Shoes power spike. At this point, you're able to 100-0 enemies if you catch them out, and with Everfrost's short cooldown, you can look to do that quite often. While he does have some insane burst potential, Vigor isn't considered a burst mage in the sense that Annie and LeBlanc are. Instead, you want to play him more like a control mage, using Everfrost and Disease Cage to control the battlefield and spamming your Q and W to break down the enemy front line, with your ult's massive execute damage being able to kill even the tankiest of targets if they get to the max damage threshold. Now rounding things out with our support picks, we'll start with the Tidecaller, Nami. Whether enchanters are strong in the meta or more on the weak side, Nami is almost always a solid pick for climbing, due to her ability to bully lanes hard with a constant poke and sustain from her W. When bullying in lane, you'll want to rarely use Q on the offensive. Not only is it hard to land when your opponent is focused on dodging it, it's also your only form of disengage, so once it's down, your opponent can look to go in and force a fight on you. At best, missing it means taking a bad trade, and at worst, not having it to disengage aggressive laners means that you'll end up with a gray screen. Your E gives you a way to enable your teammates, granting both movement speed from your passive and a slow on their attacks, helping to both kite and chase down their targets. Once you have ult, you'll mostly want to use it as a more reactive ability than a proactive one. The slow moving wave is definitely easy for opponents to dodge if it's the first ability thrown out in a fight, but it can be incredibly useful for either disengaging if your opponents attempt to start the fight or following up on your allies' engage. Next up, we have Janna. Like Nami, your goal in the early lane phase as Janna will be making yourself as annoying as possible, constantly harassing your opponent with Ws. W's slow all but guarantees that Comet will land, and that alongside with Scourge really starts to add up as you spam it over and over again. While Nami's harass is a bit stronger, since it also heals her on 80 carry, Janna is much safer to use, since her Q is a much more reliable disengage tool than Nami's relatively hard to hit bubble. When you're able to force your opponents back to base, if you aren't in need of a recall yourself, make the most of the movement speed that you get from your passive and W to move across the map to get vision control, or even look to pay a visit mid. While Janna ganks may sound underwhelming, they're also super unexpected, and can often result in a kill or at least a flash being down by the enemy laner. In teamfights, the one mistake I see a lot of Jannas make is just poor positioning. While most people think poor positioning means being caught out, in this case, it's kind of the opposite. It's sitting way too far back, even behind the carries that Janna should be protecting. Think about it, your Q and ult can knock up and push back enemy threats, so move up to put yourself between the divers and your carries. If your AD carry has to flash before you use ult as Janna, you're probably playing her rug in most cases. And finishing off our list, we have Galio. While enchanters are generally the easier, more consistent, and overall less stressful ways to climb, they also lack the potential to make the huge game-winning plays that tankier supports have. So if you prefer the slightly higher risk, higher reward style of the latter group, we're throwing him out as a pick too. One of the important things when it comes to deciding on a champ to main is how well it's going to work in a certain team comp. In the case of bot lane, it's even more important, since not all champs pair super well together. For example, Draven players usually don't want to see their support lock in Yuumi, but the nice thing about Galio is that while he does pair super well with aggressive AD carries that make use of his ability to engage fights, you can easily shift gears with him and use his kit defensively to peel threats from reaching your carry instead. He also comes with pretty solid pushing power compared to the other tankier supports. While wave clear may not seem like a super important strength for a support, you'd be surprised. Wave management can matter as much or even more than fighting power, since it gives you the priority for scuttle fights, invade, and allowing you to more easily take a reset when you're ready for it. Remember, you're tank Galio support though, not full AP Galio mid. This means that out of lane, you will not be deleting targets with a single combo, and instead, you're fully team reliant. While you can start up fights with your engage, bear in mind that even with flash up, Galio's combo is relatively slow. Overcommitting without actually locking anyone down usually means that he'll just be blown up. So instead of forcing fights hard by yourself, use your ult to follow up on a teammate's engage. In the event that your team comp is more about front-to-back fights rather than diving onto the enemy, put yourself between your carries and any divers that the enemy has, use your W and E to stop them in their tracks, and lock them down for your carries to deal with. And one quick tip for Galio, your ult isn't just useful for the CC it provides. The magic damage shield can be huge in helping to mitigate magic damage in teamfights, so be sure to keep that in mind when playing against champs with huge multi-target ults like Swain, Karthus, and Fiddle. And that's it for our top 3 champs to main on 11.6. Just realized Bard wasn't in that video, so I'll have to talk with our analysts, but either way, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to sub so that you never miss out on our meta guides and you're always in the loop for what the best picks are. Also, don't forget to answer our question of the day in the comments down below and check out our community Discord through the link in the description. That's it for today, so as always, best of luck on the Rift, stay hydrated, and I'll see you next time.